All right, what is up, class? We're going to be talking about the South in the 1820s through the 1860s, the economic, social, and political aspects of it. Now we're going to jump into the economic aspect of the South first. There was a significant shift of economic power from the upper to the lower South. Tobacco was one of the main crops grown in the South. The upper South continued to rely on the cultivation of tobacco that marked this crop to be unstable. It made it difficult for most growers. Now, the prices were subject to frequent depressions due to the high prices. It was difficult for farmers to grow and remain in business in the same place for a long time. So farmers began moving westward into the Piedmont region, and they also began shifting to other crops, such as wheat. Now that is a farmer holding wheat. Now sugar grew along the Gulf Coast, and farmers enjoyed a reasonably profitable market. It could only grow in the coastal regions of the southeast. Now, another common crop was rice, and rice grew in the coastal south, which included South Carolina, Georgia, and other parts of Florida. And they continued to rely on the cultivation of rice. It failed because of the substantial decrease in profit because it took so long, 9 months to be exact. Now that is exactly why it went down in profit. Sad face. Now, cotton grew only in the coastal regions of the southeast. The demand for it grew fast, and it soon became the main export of the southern economy. It also enabled textiles to be produced. They needed cotton to create these products, and the picture shown is a quilt. Now, men and women began moving to uncultivated lands to establish new cotton growing regions. Also, slavery increased because of the demand of cotton products. And those are slaves holding cotton. They're very sad. Now, in the South, there were few roads, and the ones that were there weren't strong enough to transport heavy materials, and canals were basically non-existent. So railroads expanded substantially. Now, the colonial dependency was when the Southerners relied heavily on the North for financial banking. A Bank of America right there. Now we're going to jump into the social aspect of the South. There were four main classes. Take note of the pyramid at the top left, which represents the highest to the lowest classes. The first we're talking about was the planter class. These guys had a planter aristocracy, which included wealthy landowners who maintained homes in towns and cities. They also had many slaves with large plantations. This class was also compared to the upper classes of England and other European nations. Now, what you're seeing being drawn right now are two slaves with wheat and tobacco in their hands, being very sad. Crops are growing as we speak, and clouds magically appear with the sun. Now, the second class was the plain folk, which is the blue, marked in the blue in the pyramid, plain folk. Now that is exactly what they look like. They were mostly yeoman farmers that were typically white Southerners. Most of them owned land and were devoted to farmland. Subsistence farming was significant, and it helped grow cotton farming for market. They continued to expand, which was another reason slave labor increased. Now, that was not to good for the slaves because that means they had to work harder and they're more sad. Now, the third class was the southern ladies. That is the red in the triangle. These women were affluent white women who lived in the South. Their main purpose was to serve their husbands and be nurturing mothers. They didn't have the right to vote and weren't allowed to engage in public activities. This include this included holding office as much as the northern women were. They were usually home spinning, weaving, and performing agricultural tasks, which actually did have an effect on the economic life because the products they created were often sold. The southern ladies were also less educated than the northern women. That is all the pictures of education right there. Decrease in sad face. Now, the fourth and final part of the social class was the slaves, which is the green in the pyramid. There were country slaves and city slaves. The country slaves had brutal conditions and very increased death rates. They had received bare minimum amount of necessities, and that increased death. Death went completely up. Now, the necessities, bare minimum necessities they had included toothpaste and stuff like that they weren't provided. All slaves were able to escape, or all slaves were able to scrape by. The city slaves had it a bit better. They had more freedom, and the women and children slaves were allowed to have more jobs, not just agriculture. Now that is the reason why there's a quilt being drawn with blue and green thing. And the city slaves were not so happy, but the country slaves were even sadder. Now, finally, we have the political aspect of the South. They received money from the cotton sales and production, which was the reason they helped the nation flourish. They had planter aristocracies, which was the head of the Southern society, who determined the political, economic, and even social life of the region. There was somewhat of a democracy established, but the main leader was still in control. Woo! This is the end. Thank you for watching. This was produced by our amazing crew.